600 hours, the Taiwan Strait. The sun struggles to pierce a dense layer of gray fog that blankets the turbulent waters between the mainland and the island. 6 massive U.S. destroyers slice through the chop in a staggered column, their gray hulls appearing ghost-like against the mist. The only sounds are the rhythmic thrum of massive gas turbine engines and the hiss of sea spray slapping against reinforced steel. On the bridge of the lead destroyer, the air is cold and stiff. Officers stand rigid, checking digital navigation tables and scanning the horizon through salt-crusted windows. The smell of hot electronics and strong coffee fills the confined space. The radio crackles with a sharp, distorted command. The order is absolute. The calm rhythm of the patrol breaks instantly. The helm officer spins the wheel hard to starboard. The 9,000-ton vessel leans heavily into the turn. Huge bronze propellers churn the dark water into a frothing white wake behind the ship. The engines scream as the throttle pushes to flank speed. The deck plates vibrate violently under the boots of the crew. Deep inside the hull, the machinery roars, a mechanical beast waking up. Across the formation, 5 other steel behemoths mirror the maneuver. They fan out, breaking the single-file column. Bows crash down into heavy swells, sending sheets of salt water spraying over the forward gun mounts. Signal flags snap wildly in the increasing wind generated by their speed. The destroyers drive forward, engines howling, closing the lateral gaps between them. It is a synchronized dance of immense power. They are building a physical barrier. Inside the Combat Information Center, the overhead lighting switches to combat blue. Radar operators lean forward, their faces illuminated by the green sweep of the screens. They type furiously. On the outer decks, the scene is chaotic motion. Hatches fly open. Gunners' mates rush to the rails, stripping the canvas covers off heavy machine guns. The metal clatter of ammunition belts loading into feed trays echoes against the wind. A young sailor slips on the wet, non-skid surface, his knees slamming into the deck. But he scrambles back up, hauling a heavy crate of supplies toward the aft missile launcher. The hydraulic whine of the main cannons engaging cuts through the roar of the wind. The 5-inch barrels traverse swiftly, testing their range of motion, before locking onto the empty horizon. The lead destroyer corrects its course, bringing the bow parallel to the coast. The wake from the flagship slams into the hull of the second ship, rocking it violently, but the formation does not break. They tighten the spacing. They are now arranged in a precise overlapping line. The captain grips the railing of the bridge wing, looking down the line of gray steel. He barks an order into the comms handset. The engines drop to station-keeping power. The violent vibration settles into a low, menacing hum. The 6 ships hold their position against the current. The radar arrays spin relentlessly atop the masts. The steel wall is set. The blockade is live. So 8:30 hours. The Taiwan Strait. The morning sun burns through the lingering mist, exposing the jagged gray line of the American formation. The ocean swells heave with restless energy, slapping rhythmically against the steel hulls. On the flight decks, crew members check the tie-down chains on the parked helicopters. The radar dishes continue their endless spinning vigil atop the masts. The air is still, save for the constant low-frequency hum of the ship's generators and the sound of wind whipping through the rigging. A piercing electronic warble breaks the calm in the Combat Information Center. A fresh track appears on the primary air search screen. It moves with impossible speed. The fire control officer shouts a bearing. On the bridge, officers snap binoculars to their eyes. A high-pitched whine, barely audible at first, begins to bleed out of the western sky. It grows louder, shaking the reinforced glass of the bridge windows. The sound rapidly deepens into a chest-vibrating rumble. 2 enemy fighter jets tear through the low cloud layer. They drop altitude instantly, leveling out just 50 feet above the wave tops. The sound hits the fleet like a physical hammer. The sonic boom cracks the air. Water sprays upward in twin rooster tails behind their glowing afterburners. They scream directly toward the center of the U.S. formation. Sailors on the outer decks throw themselves flat, covering their ears against the onslaught. The jet engines roar overhead, a deafening screech that vibrates the teeth of every man on board. The pressure wave rattles the antennas and shakes dust from the overhead pipes. The sheer speed of the aircraft blurs their outlines into dark gray streaks against the blue horizon. As they pass the flagship, the lead jet banks hard. The pilot flashes the underside of the wings, revealing fully loaded weapon pylons. The destroyer's automated defenses wake up instantly. The rotary barrels of the close-in weapon system spin up with a sharp mechanical whir. The radar-guided turrets snap around, tracking the retreating heat signatures with robotic precision. The barrels elevate, locking onto the targets, waiting for the final key turn. The fighters pull vertical, climbing back into the safety of the clouds with a final thunderous rumble. The noise fades, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. White smoke trails linger in the air. A young lookout slowly stands up, his hands trembling as he brushes rust flakes from his uniform. The captain stares at the radar screen. The message is delivered. 1,000 hours. The Taiwan Strait. The harsh morning light disappears behind a rolling wall of dense gray fog. The visibility drops to near zero. The ocean turns a dark, sludgy green. On the bridge of the U.S. flagship, the humidity spikes, causing condensation to drip from the overhead piping. The rhythmic sweeping sound of the windshield wipers battles against the heavy mist coating the glass. Inside the bridge, the silence is thick, broken only by the hum of the ventilation and the static hiss of the radio. Officers stand hunched over the radar repeaters, the green glow reflecting off their tense faces. "Contact!" The shout from the starboard lookout shatters the quiet. He points a trembling hand toward the gray curtain of fog. 3 dark shapes tear through the mist. Enemy frigates. They materialize less than 2 miles away, their bows plowing deep into the waves, sending white spray flying over their superstructures. They are not drifting, they are charging. The engines of the enemy ships smoke heavily, pumping black soot into the air as they push for maximum speed. They head straight for the center of the American line, aiming for the gap between the lead destroyer and the second ship. The collision alarm blares throughout the U.S. ship. The klaxon screams a rhythmic, piercing warning. "Brace for shock," the officer of the deck bellows. Sailors in the passageways grab handholds and lock their knees. On the bridge, the captain grabs the comms handset. He keys the mic. "Unidentified warships, this is the United States Navy. You are on a collision course. Alter steerage immediately." The radio spits back a garbled, aggressive response in a foreign tongue. The enemy ships do not slow down. They accelerate. The lead enemy frigate looms larger, filling the view of the bridge windows. Its sleek, angled hull cuts the water like a knife. The distance closes rapidly. 1,000 yards, 800 yards. The U.S. captain barks a tactical order. "Rudder amidships, hold the line. Do not give an inch." The U.S. destroyer maintains its course, a stubborn wall of steel refusing to yield. The bow of the enemy frigate rushes forward. It looks like it will ram the U.S. midsection. At 400 yards, the enemy captain flinches. The frigate banks violently to port. The hull leans precariously, the rail nearly dipping into the sea. The enemy ship scrapes past the U.S. destroyer's stern, missing by less than 50 yards. The massive displacement of water from the turn hits the U.S. ship like a tidal wave. The destroyer shudders and rolls heavily to starboard. Books and coffee mugs fly off the bridge tables, crashing to the deck. As the enemy ship slides past, the two crews stare at each other across the churning water. Enemy sailors on the frigate's wing point and shout. The U.S. gunners on the .50 caliber mounts grip their triggers, knuckles white, barrels tracking the passing bridge. The main 5-inch cannon on the U.S. foredeck rotates with a heavy mechanical groan, keeping its muzzle pointed directly at the enemy's waterline. The enemy frigates speed away into the fog behind the U.S. line, their wakes rocking the American formation for minutes after they vanish. The captain exhales, his grip loosening on the console. The steel wall remains unbroken. 1,145 hours. The Taiwan Strait. The sun hangs high now, baking the steel decks of the American flotilla. The earlier fog has burned off, leaving the air clear but shimmering with heat. On the bridge of the flagship, the rhythmic hum of operations abruptly dies. A high-pitched electronic scream tears through the headsets of every crew member. The tactical displays flicker, green lines distort into jagged waves. Then, the screens wash out completely. A blizzard of white static floods the monitors in the Combat Information Center. The radar sweep freezes. The radio channels dissolve into a cacophony of screeching feedback and garbled noise. "Jamming!" The tactical action officer yells over the din. He rips his headset off and slams it onto the console. "We are blind electronically. Heavy interference across all bands." On the starboard bridge wing, the lookout raises his binoculars. He scans the water with naked eyes. He spots movement. A lone vessel breaks from the cluster of civilian traffic miles away. It is small, rusted, and painted a peeling blue. A fishing trawler. But it moves wrong. It does not bob lazily in the swell. It planes on top of the water. The trawler's bow lifts high into the air. A massive wake churns behind it. Black smoke pours from its exhaust stack, choking the air behind it. It is sprinting. The trawler cuts a straight line toward the broadside of the U.S. flagship. "Inbound surface contact! High speed!" The lookout screams, pointing. The captain steps to the wing. He sees the rust bucket racing closer. 2,000 yards. It ignores the standard exclusion zone. "Sound the whistle," the captain orders. The ship's whistle blasts. 5 short, deafening bursts. The sound rolls over the water, vibrating the hull. The trawler does not alter course, it accelerates. The distance shrinks, 500 yards. Weapons free, warning shots only, 25 millimeter, cut the water in front of him, the captain commands. On the deck below, the gunner on the Mk-38 chain gun swings the barrel. He depresses the triggers. Thump, 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 thump. The heavy autocannon barks rhythmically. Shell casings cling to the deck. Tracers streak through the air, burning bright red against the blue water. They slam into the ocean 50 yards ahead of the speeding trawler. Geysers of white water erupt, creating a wall of spray. The trawler smashes through the water wall. It does not turn. It jinks left, then right, erratic and aggressive. The distance closes to 800 yards. The engine noise of the small boat is audible now, a high-pitched mechanical whine pushed to the breaking point. It is not fishing, it is hunting. 1,147 hours, the Taiwan Strait. The blue fishing trawler closes the distance, 400 yards. The sound of its engine is a high-pitched mechanical scream that cuts through the wind. On the destroyer's deck, the gunners track the erratic movement of the small boat. The captain's voice is ice-cold over the general announcing system. Batteries release, take it out. The 25mm chain gun roars. This is not a warning. A stream of high-explosive incendiary rounds lashes out from the gray hull. The tracers stitch a line of fire across the water, walking directly into the trawler's bow. The impact is instant. The wooden hull shreds. Planks explode into matchsticks. The wheelhouse disintegrates in a cloud of glass and blue paint. But the boat does not stop. It carries too much momentum. It slews sideways, burning, sliding toward the destroyer's beam. Then the payload detonates. It is not a fuel explosion. It is a warhead. A blinding sphere of orange fire erupts from the water surface, instantly vaporizing the trawler. The ocean craters. A massive wall of water and debris blasts outward. The shockwave hits the U.S. destroyer a split second later. Crack! The sound is louder than thunder. The steel hull of the warship rings like a struck bell. On the bridge, officers are thrown forward. The reinforced glass windows spiderweb with a sickening crunch. Dust falls from the ceiling tiles. On the outer decks, sailors are lifted off their feet and slammed into bulkheads. The heat from the fireball washes over the starboard side, singing the paint. General quarters! General quarters! All hands man your battle stations! The bosun's whistle screams through the internal speakers. The alarm klaxon begins its rhythmic, urgent bonging. Marines grab their rifles and sprint through the tilting passageways. Damage control teams rush forward, dragging heavy fire hoses. The smell of cordite and burnt explosive hangs heavy in the air. The steel wall is under attack. 1,330 hours. The Taiwan Strait. Black smoke from the destroyed trawler stains the sky, drifting low over the water. The U.S. formation is tight, the ships bristling with weapons. Damage control teams on the flagship spray foam over the scorched starboard hull. The metal hisses as it cools. The air is thick with the smell of burnt paint and ozone. Silence has returned, but it is the heavy, suffocating silence of a drawn breath before a scream. Illuminator detected! The electronic warfare officer screams, his voice cracking. Multiple distinct sources, high-band targeting radar. They are locking us up. On the horizon, the silhouettes of 4 enemy destroyers break through the haze. They are no longer hiding. Their main radar directors spin and stop, pointing directly at the American ships. Invisible beams of energy wash over the U.S. fleet, painting them for guided missiles. The threat warning gear on the bridge wails, a continuous, high-pitched tone that signifies imminent launch. Deploy countermeasures, all ships execute Delta maneuver, the captain yells, gripping the overhead handle. On the weather decks of the 6 U.S. ships, the super rapid Bloom offboard chaff launchers pivot. Whoomp, 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 mortar rounds shoot into the sky. They burst open seconds later. Millions of hair-thin aluminum strips explode outward, creating massive, glittering silver clouds that hang in the air. The wind catches the metallic confetti, spreading it into false radar targets to confuse the enemy sensors. Simultaneously, the Nulka active decoys launch. Rocket motors ignite with a sharp hiss. The decoys hover away from the ships, suspended in the air, broadcasting intense electronic jamming signals to lure enemy missiles away from the hulls. The ocean becomes a confused arena of electronic noise and silver clouds. The enemy destroyers do not back down. Their bow waves rise. They turn broadside, unmasking their missile tubes. The hatch covers on their forward decks blast open. The standoff is over. 1,332 hours, the Taiwan Strait. The standoff snaps. A blinding flash ignites on the forward deck of the lead enemy destroyer. A column of thick white smoke erupts skyward, expanding rapidly against the blue backdrop. From the center of the smoke, A dark cylindrical shape rockets upward. It climbs for a split second, then tips over, dropping dangerously low toward the water. The anti-ship missile levels out. Its booster engine jettisons. The turbojet ignites with a high-pitched scream. It skims the wavetops, accelerating to supersonic speed. "Vampire! Vampire! Inbound, bearing 270!" the tactical action officer shouts. His voice is raw. On the foredeck of the U.S. destroyer, the armored hatches of the vertical launch system blow open. A blast of flame roars from the silo. The interceptor missile shoots out of the tube, riding a pillar of fire and gray smoke. It clears the superstructure in a heartbeat. The thrust vectoring kicks in. The missile pivots sharply in midair, pointing its nose toward the horizon. The main motor engages with a deafening roar. It streaks away, leaving a corkscrew trail of smoke. The two missiles race toward each other. The enemy weapon is a sea-skimming predator, hugging the water to avoid radar. The U.S. interceptor dives from above, a kinetic hammer falling from the sky. The distance closes at Mach 3. The air between them compresses. They meet 2 miles out. The interception is violent and absolute. The U.S. missile slams into the enemy warhead. Crack, boom. A massive sphere of orange fire expands instantly, blotting out the horizon. The explosion creates a shockwave that ripples across the water surface, flattening the waves. Black smoke billows outward, mixing with the burning fuel. The sound reaches the U.S. fleet 3 seconds later, a heavy concussive thud that rattles the steel plates of the deck. Flaming debris rains down into the ocean, hissing as it extinguishes in the salt water. The sky clears, but the smoke stain remains. 1400 hours, the Taiwan Strait. The orange glow of the mid-air explosion fades, leaving a drifting curtain of black smoke. The cheers in the Combat Information Center die instantly. Physics dictates that the debris must land. The shredded remains of the enemy missiles, still traveling at near supersonic speeds, exit the smoke cloud like a shotgun blast. A massive, jagged section of the missile's fuselage spins wildly through the air. It slams into the superstructure of the second U.S. destroyer. Crunch. The sound is the shriek of tearing metal. The debris shears through the steel plating near the aft funnel. It slices through high-pressure hydraulic lines like a razor through skin. Pressurized fluid sprays out in a fine mist, coating the hot exhaust uptake. It ignites instantly. A fireball whooshes up the side of the stack, engulfing the midship's deck. Thick, oily smoke is sucked into the ventilation intakes, pumping choking fumes into the ship's interior. Inside the skin of the ship, red emergency lights bathe the passageways in a blood-colored gloom. "Damage control party, lay to the aft superstructure. Class Bravo, fire!" The shout echoes over the 1MC circuit. Sailors in heavy flash gear and breathing apparatus sprint toward the heat. They drag heavy hoses, slipping on the slick, foamy deck. The heat is physical, a wall that pushes them back. The team leader grabs the nozzleman by the harness and shoves him forward. "Open the bail!" he screams through his mask. The nozzleman pulls the handle. A jet of AFF foam blasts into the heart of the fire. The flames roar back, fighting the suppression. Steam hisses violently as the foam hits the superheated steel. The paint on the bulkheads blisters and peels away. The team leans in, shoulder to shoulder, boots locked on the deck, pushing the wall of water and foam against the wall of fire. They do not retreat. 1430 hours, the Taiwan Strait. The smoke from the extinguishing fire drifts astern, mixing with the salt spray. The surface of the ocean is choppy, hiding secrets beneath the white caps. Inside the sonar room of the lead destroyer, the silence is absolute. The sonar technician presses his headphones tight against his ears. He stares at the waterfall display on his screen. A distinct rhythmic anomaly cuts through the background noise of the ocean. It is the sound of a screw turning deep underwater. "Transient, subsurface contact, close aboard," the technician shouts. On the surface, the water 2 miles off the port beam disturbs. It does not wave, it bulges. A periscope shears through the surface tension, leaving a feather of white foam. Then a black dorsal fin breaks the water. An enemy attack submarine rises to periscope depth, preparing to fire. High above, a U.S. MH-60R helicopter banks sharply. The pilot spots the dark cigar-shaped shadow against the turquoise water. He pushes the stick forward. The helicopter dives. The rotor wash whips the ocean surface into a frenzy. "Weapon away," the pilot says. The bay doors on the helicopter's belly snap open. A lightweight torpedo drops free. A small parachute deploys, slowing its descent for a split second before it hits the water. Splash! The parachute jettisons. The torpedo's motor activates with a high-pitched whine. It begins a spiral search pattern, pinging the depths. The submarine attempts to dive. The black fin slips back under the waves. It is too late. The torpedo acquires the lock. It accelerates, leaving a streak of bubbles. It strikes the submarine's hull just aft of the conning tower. Boom! The ocean erupts. A massive column of white water shoots 300 feet into the air. The shockwave travels faster through the water than the air, slamming against the hulls of the destroyers like a sledgehammer. The surface boils. Debris, insulation, oil, and twisted metal bubbles to the surface. A large oil slick begins to spread, calming the chop. The threat is neutralized. 1600 hours, the Taiwan Strait. The sun dips toward the western horizon, turning the ocean surface a blinding metallic gold. The smoke from the earlier engagements has thinned to a haze. On the U.S. ship's ammunition elevators hum continuously, bringing fresh shells to the deck guns. The crews are sweat-soaked and covered in soot. They do not rest. They watch the sky. The long-range radar sounds the alarm. It is not a single ping. It is a continuous, solid tone. The radar screen does not show individual contacts. It shows a cloud. Massive air raid inbound. Bearing 270, multiple bogies, they are swarming. The tactical action officer roars. The western horizon fills with black specks. They look like a plague of locusts. Dozens of enemy fighter jets and heavy bombers drop from the clouds, flying shoulder to shoulder in a dense attack formation. They do not maneuver. They rely on sheer numbers to overwhelm the defense. All ships, free fire! Empty the magazines! The Commodore orders. The steel wall erupts. Every weapon system on the 6 U.S. destroyers fires simultaneously. The noise is not a sound. It is a physical pressure that ruptures eardrums. The vertical launch systems ripple fire. Dozens of interceptor missiles shoot upward in a blinding rapid-fire sequence. They leave a forest of thick white smoke trails that obscure the ships entirely. The missiles arc over the water and dive into the incoming swarm. The sky detonates. Warheads explode in the center of the enemy formation. Orange fireballs bloom like unnatural flowers against the clouds. Enemy jets fly directly into the shrapnel clouds. Wings shear off. Engines explode. Burning fuselages tumble out of the sky, trailing black smoke, splashing into the sea in a chaotic rain of debris. But the survivors press on. They break through the missile screen. They enter the kill zone of the guns. The 5-inch main cannons on the U.S. ships fire airburst rounds. Boom, boom, boom! Flak clouds puff black in the air ahead of the attackers. The 20mm close-in weapon systems spin up. The electric whir turns into a chainsaw roar. Burt. Thousands of tungsten penetrator rounds saw through the air. They form a literal wall of lead. An enemy bomber flies into the stream. The aircraft disintegrates instantly. The cockpit vanishes. The fuselage shreds. The fuel tanks ignite, turning the plane into a comet that screams over the bridge of the U.S. flagship and crashes into the water on the port side. The heat from the burning jet washes over the sailors on the wing. They duck behind the steel shielding. Shrapnel clatters against the hull like hail. The air smells of sulfur and aviation fuel. The guns do not stop. The U.S. ships vibrate violently as they pour fire into the sky, turning the airspace into a grinder.